Okay, we've done our lower third. I'm going to go into our scene. I'm going to go turn on our background or reference image. The next thing that we're going to do is the breaking news bar or the strap, whatever you want to call it. So I'm going to go up into my scene tree here. I'm going to actually design it right within this same scene that we did our lower third. So if we hide our reference image, we should still have our lower third that we designed. Now I'm going to design it within this scene, but then I'm going to merge that group and save it off so that we can use it in another scene. It'll all make sense when we're done. So I'm going to go to my scene tree. I'm going to start by adding a group, and we can call this whatever we want. I'm just going to call mine breaking for breaking news. Now go back into scenes. I'm going to turn my reference image on again, and it's basically a slant bar. So if I come down to my plugins, I'm going to use one of my built-in plugins here to recreate this bar. And I know that I can use the Noggi, so I'm just going to drag the Noggi up there, and I'm going to click on the Noggi to go into the Noggi editor. First, we have an option here for width and height, and if I click and drag this, I can roughly size up the height here. Maybe we'll go to around 25 for the height, and width we'll leave there at the moment. Now the Noggi also has each corner that we can bevel to a rounded bevel or a sharp corner. So I'm going to go ahead and lower each corner of my bevel down to 0, and then below that we have a stretch. So I can come here and stretch this to the right or to the left with the Noggi, and I'm going to slide it over to see how much of a stretch we want or need. So that's pretty close right there, and the width somewhat close. We'll just adjust the width down just a little bit more, and one more just adjustment to the width right there. Okay, looks good enough. We need to obviously make it red, and we have two outliers here. So this is our mid Noggi. I'm going to rename this one to the mid. I'm going to copy that by holding down Control, clicking, and dragging. I'm going to say this is going to be my left. So I'm going to double click on that group. I'm going to call this one left. Now the width needs to be way down, so I'm going to go ahead and decrease that variable way down. I'm going to use the position here to slide it over just to see how width it is or how wide it is, and I'm going to continue to decrease my width here and just slide it over a bit, and that will look pretty close to where we want. Now I'm going to copy that left one, hold down Control, click and drag. I'm going to rename it the right one. I'm going to slide it over to the right using the transformation position here, X axis. Finally, what we would need to is to color this. Now the Noggi does not have a built-in color wheel like the rectangle did that we used for this one. So that means we need to use our materials, which would be found in the M tab within your asset view. And the M tab stands for materials. These only work within the classic mode of Vizrt T5. So here's a red. I'm just going to slide this up onto there, and you can see that it colors that bar red. We also have another red here. It has some shading in it. You can tell by the icon here. This one is more flat. Whichever one you want to use or whichever color you're using for your project, you can. I'm just sliding these up to show or see what they look like. And I like the bright red much better, so I'm just going to take that material and copy it down to each one, and now it's more right on. Okay, if I just want to break these down or organize them a little bit better into a new group, I'm going to slide them into a group. I'm just going to give it the name BR back. That's for my reference to know what that is. I need to add some text. Now I'm going to come down to my asset view. I'm going to click on my F tab for fonts. I need to find some classic fonts here, so I'm going to go into my folders and find the font that I want to use. So I'm just going to drag a font up here. If I don't like it, I can always change it later. We're going to type in the word breaking news here, all caps. We're going to come into the transformation editor. I'm going to both scale it down and reposition this over top of that strap. So remember, I'm just going to move it up in one position in Z space because I don't want the chance of it ever interfering with that background. So again, if we want to swap out a font to see what the thicker font looks like, we can. I'm going to scale that down and just reposition that as well. Now if you needed to make some slight variations to your font as well, you could double click on it and it will take you into the font editor. So what I want to do is just italicize this font a bit, and I can draw the italic on there, and I'm going to increase the amount of that italicism, and I'm going to save as, and gives us a folder name here, and we're just going to rename that font. We'll give it a name like A so we know what it is. I'm going to hit save. I'm going to close this font editor. I'm going to go back into our font tab, and here's our new font that we just italicized. So I'm going to drag that up onto the bar, and now you can see it's a little bit italicized. So we click on that classic text icon, and we have options in here that we can change. Obviously, we have things like the word spacing that we could adjust, deleting that we could adjust, tracking, other things. We also have our color in here if we needed to make this a different color other than just white. So we're going to leave that as is right now. I have all of this within a group. Let's just rename this group up here so that we know what it is. Now we aren't expecting to change this breaking news, but we may want to in the future. So if we want to come down here and set up our text box again on here, we can do that. So under the orientation, we have our text box, and I can turn that active again. We can turn our bounding box on to see where that text box is, and we're just going to adjust the width and the height of it so that if anyone ever does type anything new in there, or if we give them control to type in there, it will never go past where it's supposed to be. Lastly, I'm going to turn that text to texture instead of geometry, and you can see when we do that, it changes it just a bit. It's going to help with the optimization just a bit. And finally, I'm ready to merge this down. So I'm going to select this main breaking group here, and I'm going to go up into our top here. I'm going to look for the icon or the rollover that tells us to merge with actions and events. So as long as you have a topmost group highlighted, this will work. And we're going to click on that merge with actions and events, and what it does is merges this container down into one. Now I'm going to come down into my asset view, into my groups, and I'm just going to slide this breaking news group that we just merged down into my G tab, into any folder that I selected. I'm going to give this the name of breaking. I'm going to hit OK, and here's our object. Now, since we may need to call this breaking up news separately from our lower third, it cannot be in the same scene. We're not doing transition logic with Vizrt, so that means the lower third and the breaking news would need to be in a separate scene so that you could call them up separately. So now that's what we need to do. We have our breaking saved here. We're just going to hide that for now. I'm going to save. You can save the scene if you want to, and then I'm going to close it. Now we could come over and say create new scene by right clicking within here, and we're going to call this breaking. I'll click OK. I'm going to double click on that breaking scene, and now that scene is open. I'm going to go into my G or group tab that I just placed my group into, and I'm going to find that breaking news. I'm going to slide it up into my scene. I'm going to split that group, and it places it right in here. So you notice that we don't pick up any colors or anything within that group, and that might be a little shocking at first if that happened to you. What you need to know or do is go over to your scenes and just make sure that you are in the classic mode, because we opened and started a brand new scene, and by default it goes to the Viz Engine render mode. So just make sure that you're in the classic mode when you start a new scene, and it will pick up all the colors and the text that you have. The strap or the group that we placed in here is perfectly placed right above the lower third. And if we go into our scene background, our scene settings here, and if we want to grab that image as a reference, we certainly could. So we could slide this up into the background, and you can see that breaking news is right where it's supposed to be because we set it up within the other scene. I'm going to hide that background reference there. And now finally the last step for this would be to animate it on. So we'll cover that in another video. Just remember to save your scene, and we're going to move on to the third part, which is the upper right.